A Witch and the Whispering Woe, Chapter 1. I'm using my professional reading voice, so I hope you guys enjoy. Okay. Chapter 1. It usually does not happen that someone like Jubliss would take the longest possible path to her destination. All of a sudden, she jumped out of her favorite rocking chair, making it swing wildly a few more times before dashing towards the main hall. Instead of gracefully walking through it, she just ran. Instead of a charming, perhaps even seductive brush against the cupboard or a tall mirror in the hall or any other of her belongings, she flew by them like a bullet, out of the hall and into the guest room, ignoring everyone present. She continued dashing towards the kitchen and its back door. She almost bumped into the back door before standing on her hind feet, reaching up with her paws and scratching on the door. Bree caught herself daydreaming again. The smell of Mediterranean spices from a steaming pot where the large portion of macaroni was boiling carried her thoughts away as always. There was something about this particular scent that always made Bree travel to another dimension. It was not the spices, it was the pasta, which, when well made, was Bree's absolute favorite. Today she had decided to cook Mediterranean. Enjoying the aroma of it, she was looking through the window, which gave her a clear view of the coast. Longview was a small town in Rhode Island, and Bree considered her bed and breakfast to be in one of the best possible spots. It was not far from the town center, and being a little uphill, it gave her guests and herself a wonderful view. The weather was near perfect today. Both the locals and the tourists always appreciated a few extra warm, sunny days at the end of summer. It was a warm September, and the post-season tourists were enjoying the calm atmosphere as much as Bree. It was then that she heard Jubliss scratch on the door. She allowed herself to ignore the cat for a little bit more, taking a deep breath and closing her eyes for a moment, just to enjoy the short break from the everyday strain. Jubliss paused, scratched on the door again. "Please open the door already," Jubliss spoke finally after a few more seconds. Bree quickly turned her head to Jubliss and picked her up. "Jubliss," she hissed, "you know what I told you about talking to me. There are guests around and we both could get into trouble." Jubliss looked at her. "Meow, wow," she grunted. "I'm serious." Bree frowned at her, still whispering. Jubliss looked in her eyes as if saying, "Fine, just open that door already." "She's a witch." "Obviously." "A witch in the Whispering Woe." A witch was her talking cat. Okay. "I give up," spoke Bree, softly as she placed Jubliss down gently, caressing her golden striped fur from head to tail before walking to the back door. As she grabbed the door handle, Bree stopped, feeling the smell of something about to burn. She turned back to the kitchen, taking a look at the stove. "Ahem," Jubliss cleared her throat quietly. "Will you please open that darn door?" she whispered carefully yet aggressively. "Jubliss," Bree hissed back at her, pushing the door handle down and finally opening the door. She thought how Jubilee, as clever as she was, should have learned to open the doors herself. She could just jump up and grab onto the handle using her weight to pull the handle down and make the door open. Whether it was politeness or more likely the cat's laziness that prevented her from doing such things, Bree never could tell. The door showed some resistance halfway, thinking of how she should call Damien, the local handyman. Bree pushed it slightly harder. The door slid open to the backyard and Jubilee finally dashed down. As Bree watched Jubilee go, she saw her jump on the porch where Mrs. Jilly Case, the cook, was sitting. That was surprising enough, though, since the cat never had liked her too much. She was one of those sweet old ladies, but a terrible gossip monger at the same time. Somehow this was something that everyone forgave her, either because she was a splendid cook or because she never had meant any harm. After retiring from her job as a high school teacher, she had been employed at Bree's Bed and Breakfast and had been a great help to Bree ever since. Not only were her cooking skills the exact opposite of Bree's, but her never-ending chatter also gave a more comfortable, cozy feeling to the kitchen. Her kitchen chores had been done a while ago, so she must have been enjoying a bit of the sunny weather outside. Jubilee approached the old woman and sniffed a little, then sat in front of her and meowed loudly. Bree approached Jilly slowly. She was sitting with her hands in her lap without moving, her head cast down as if looking at something in her hands. "Mrs. Case?" Bree called. "Mrs. Case, are you all right?" The old lady did not reply. Bree felt a rush of cold sweat run down her back. As she approached, Bree saw old Jilly holding a nondescript piece of black leather clutch in her hand. Her hands were not moving and she clearly was not breathing. Bree felt her heart sink as she leaned down to touch her jugular vein gently. "Oh my," she gasped. There was no doubt any longer. Mrs. Jilly Case was dead. Bree's face broke into a desperate crying grimace. Bree felt Jubilee gently brushing against her leg as if trying to comfort her. Her heart rate had increased and her skin was sweating rapidly. "You should get help, dear," spoke the cat in a gently tone. Then she had bumped Bree's left hand, trying to cuddle with her. Bree stood up quickly, tears still running down her cheeks, and sprinted back inside. Poor thing, Jubilee thought. Is she going to call someone? She went after Bree at a slow, lazy pace. Bree's shaking hands could be heard from inside, tapping the dials of an old phone. Her voice was cracked and stuttering as she spoke to someone on the other side, barely able to say her name and address properly. Poor thing, Jubilee thought again. I wonder if she'll notice that her food has burned again. She then looked back at Mrs. Case's body. "I think we'll be seeing each other soon," she stated in a soft yet indifferent tone. No more than 15 minutes later, 2 police officers were in the backyard of Bree's Bed and Breakfast. As the establishment was well known in town, they knew exactly who called them and and where they were going. They were also kind enough to approach the building from behind to avoid disturbing Bree's guests. Bree already had returned to the backyard in the meantime, standing beside the lifeless body of Mrs. Gillie's case. Struggling to pull herself together, shortly after the ambulance arrived as well, determining with official certainty that Mrs. Case had passed away. As both parties had concluded, a large lump on the back of her head indicated the cause of death was not natural. A murder, whispered Bree to herself as she lay on her bed that evening. Jubilee bounced onto the bed and curled up on Bree's belly. Her purring calmed Bree down a little bit. In my bed and breakfast, no less, she pondered loudly. My bed and breakfast, Jubilee corrected her. Fine, yours. Everything mine is yours. You are one possessive ball fur, you know that. Bree took a deep breath, listening to the damp noise outside, and she allowed herself to drift into sleep with the sounds around her. Her bed and breakfast establishment was also her home, with one larger room designated for herself only. It was no 5-star hotel, but it was clean and comfortable, and Bree took great care to keep it that way. Her room was the only place that was off limits for the 2 maids that worked there. Having inherited the bed and breakfast from its previous owners, the late Mrs. Smith, she considered it both privilege and great responsibility. No guest ever has complained about anything under her watch, which was something she was very proud of. Most of the townsfolk knew that just as well. This included the public services, which also had obligated her today by not alarming anyone unnecessarily. Jubilee looked in her eyes as Bree remembered the public service again. Without saying a word, she reached out with her paw for Bree's left hand, clearly ordering Bree to pet her. Bree sighed once more, placing her hand on Jubilee's back and caressing her striped fur slowly. The cat purred a little bit louder now, calming Bree down even more. Bree closed her eyes as she calmed down, allowing herself to drift off. Tomorrow will be a new day. Chapter 2. How many times am I going to have to repeat this to you, Vicky? I do not want to have anything with this whole affair. Bree barked at her friend as she was pouring herself another cup of coffee. It was 7:30 in the morning, and although most of Bree's guests had not gotten up yet, her best friend Vicky made sure to visit her as early as possible. Not only to visit her, but to comment on what happened, and perhaps persuade Bree into helping with the investigation. So far, Bree showed firm resistance towards the latter. All right, Bree. Fine. Calm down, spoke Vicky while sipping her coffee at a slower pace. I just wanted to talk. There's no need to get all upset about it. Bree sat back at the table sipping her coffee. Her eyes were fixated on her friend. Vicky waited for a second or so, then continued. I think there were a few people who could have done it. Bree nodded, still listening. See, we both know what kind of person old Julie was. Excuse me? Bree raised her eyebrow. No, I didn't mean she was a bad person. I'm just saying she was the local gossip queen. That's true, Bree agreed. You think someone would kill her because of that? Look, old Jilly used to gossip about everyone everywhere frequently and repeatedly. It's quite possible she said something too juicy and somebody wanted to shut her up. Bree gave it a bit of a thought. Vicky, her best friend, was a clever girl. There was no doubt about it. She had known her for almost 2 full decades now. And she knew that when Vicky talks about something, she knows whereof she speaks. Still, Bree hoped that it was not another attempt at persuading her into dealing with the trouble. Just last week, Vicky continued, old Jilly had interrupted a whist game between the 4 ladies who regularly play at your bed and breakfast. I remember that, Bree confirmed. I don't know exactly what she said, but it was something about Mrs. Rowland. I saw her face grow pale. The 3 other ladies chuckled, then burst into laughter as Mrs. Rowland went red as a fresh tomato. Vicky paused, taking a small chocolate cookie from the bowl on the table. I don't think Ariana would be capable of doing that, Bree replied. She doesn't strike me as someone capable of a murder, let alone over a simple piece of gossip. Heck, I'm sure all the whist ladies already forgot about it by today. Still, she could have had a motive. You never know what people are capable of. Vicky sipped her coffee. As bad as Bree might have been as a cook, her coffee was surprisingly good. Whenever she had the time, she would not use the coffee machine. She preferred to grind the beans for a fresh pressed brew. It had much more flavor and a far greater morning kick. Vicky looked through the dining room door, where Lynette, one of the maids, just had entered to do her cleaning chores before continuing her observations. Then there's young Mr. Dave Williams. Breezy, Bree asked, in a moment in disbelief, but then realizing where Vicky was going. Old Jilly had gossiped about him in her repertoire just as anyone else did, right? Bree nodded slowly. But he was one of the rare few who actually was kind to her, wasn't he? Yep, Vicky confirmed. In fact, he was suspiciously kind to her, if you ask me. Breezy was Mrs. 𝐾's old student back in the day when Mrs. 𝐾 worked as a teacher at a local high school, and one of the few who refused to leave town after graduating. As such, the 2 might have remained in good relations. You are right, of course. Bree agreed after a few more moments of thinking about it. Old Jilly never spared Breezy in her gossips. But then again, nobody did. He's almost a local celebrity, Bree chuckled. I have heard more than once that he's always nice to her because she knows something about him, Vicky's asserted. I've heard that too, but what? It's not like it's not like everybody isn't talking virtually everything about him already, Bree said, trying to dismiss the idea. Yes, but you know how it goes. It's all well and good as long as it's just rumors. Supposedly, old Jilly actually knew something. Bree turned her head away slightly, looking through the window. It was a beautiful morning, and she found herself almost too lost in thought to notice, and suddenly all too interested in figuring out what actually did happen. Marcia, the other maid, entered through the dining room entrance and looked around to see if any cleaning needed done. So you think it's most likely someone killed old Julie because of what she knew or said about them? Bree asked finally in a now quieter tone. Either that or Vicky raised her finger and made a dramatic pause, or because of how she treated him. Him? You mean? Bree started, but Vicky interrupted her. Listen, I'm not pointing my finger at anyone, but apart from gossiping about everyone everywhere, old Julie used to have quite a special treatment for Tom. Right? Bree's mind went back to the day earlier when she found Mrs. K's body. Wait a minute, she exclaimed. Yesterday I found something in her hands. She was sitting on the porch and there was some kind of a leather patch in her hands. Vicky's eyes widened in a surprise. That could be it. Do you still have it? Bree was rummaging through her pockets already, and she quickly pulled out the piece of leather cloth, placing it out on the table. That looks like a patch from Tom's jacket, Vicky observed, taking it in her hands. It does indeed, Bree agreed. Perhaps I should give it to the police, she said. Perhaps, Vicky replied slowly. Perhaps you should ask old Julie first. No, responded Bree shortly once more. Which part of N-O did you not understand the first time I said it? Out of nowhere, Jublius jumped onto the table and sniffed the bowl, which still had 2 cookies left in it. I don't suppose you two are going to finish that, she asked. Bree grabbed her behind the neck and put her down on the floor. Jublius made an annoyed meow. My cookies. Bree sighed, taking 1 cookie and cracking it into a few pieces in her hand before placing it on the floor. There you go. Enjoy, she said. Vicky smiled as they both heard pleased meows and purrs as Jublius crunched on the cookie pieces. It really could be Tom, Bree said in a low voice, more to herself than to Vicky. She remembered how Tom used to help out old Julie when she worked as a cook in Brianna's bed and breakfast. Since he had dropped out of high school, the former teacher had a less than amiable opinion about Tom, and she wasted no opportunity to show it. While Tom did his best to help her with anything she asked, she always would find a reason to give him a hard time. In one way or another, since they both worked for Bree, she often could hear their banter. A few weeks ago, she had overheard the conversation between the two when Tom talked to old Julie about something school-related. Perhaps he thought it would improve her opinion of him, although Bree was not sure what exactly they spoke of. Come to think of it, he was trying exceptionally hard to impress her all the time. Perhaps he eventually snapped and could not take her treatment any longer. Indeed, the strict old teacher, if she got personal as she had with Tom, was able to drive anyone insane. Marr, Jublius' voice interrupted Bree's train of thought. She looked down at her. Cats can count, you know, said Jublius, licking the crumbs off her whiskers. The guests will be here any time now. Vicky stood up, helping Bree clean the table. Jublius snuck into the kitchen, looking to see if she could find something to eat before Bree ruined it. Oh, good thing you're here, said Bree as she walked into the kitchen. I'd like you to help me make breakfast and lunch, 𝙬𝙬. The cat gave her a puzzled look. Meow, she asked. Oh my gosh. I think I skipped a page by accident. No. Okay. Let me go back. Cats can count, you know, said 𝙬𝙬, licking the crumbs off her whiskers. Oh yeah, I did skip it. Well, perhaps we can count as much as you humans can, but I still know the difference between 1 and 2. Bree looked back at the table and the bowl was a single cookie left, meeting Vicky's eyes, who was on the brink of bursting into laughter. Fine, fine, you little ferocious beast, she said finally. But not another word from you, all right? She ordered while cracking the last cookie and handing it to 𝙬𝙬. The guests will be here any time now. Vicky stood up, helping Bree clean the table. 𝙬𝙬 snuck into the kitchen, looking to see if she could find something to eat before Bree ruined it. Oh, good thing you're here, said Bree as she walked into the kitchen. I'd like you to help me make breakfast and lunch, 𝙬𝙬. The cat gave her a puzzled look. Meow, she asked. Bree sat on a chair, burying her face in her palms. It suddenly hit her that her cook was no longer there and she was on her own until she found someone else. I hate cooking, she whispered to herself. 𝙬𝙬 bumped the back of her left hand with her nose. Bree looked at her. Correction, she mouthed. I hate being so bad at cooking. 𝙬𝙬 was sitting in front of her, not saying a word. Look, 𝙬𝙬, I wouldn't ask you in any other situation, but I really need help. Fat chance, 𝙬𝙬 replied shortly. I'm not doing any work for you. Bree sighed. All right, listen, she said finally. Either you help me or you'll stay hungry, because without help, I'll ruin everything. 𝙬𝙬 gazed at her for a moment, wondering she was actually serious. Then she bounced onto the kitchen cupboard and sat beside the stove. I'll say something when I see or smell something suspicious, she stated. Just say meow, please, Bree asked politely. Fine, agreed 𝙬𝙬, but only for today. Tomorrow you're on your own. Find yourself a cook or cook things yourself. I can hunt for myself, she concluded. Bree sighed. Thank you, 𝙬𝙬. I guess you are probably right. I should look for someone to work in the kitchen and someone to bake some more cookies, she thought to herself. As much as she loved them, she did not dare make them on her own. At least not without paying full attention to that only. I think I heard a motorcycle approaching, said Vicky, as she placed 2 empty coffee cups and the cookie bowl on the counter. Be careful, she warned her friend. Bree looked at the back door. Tom usually rode his bike to work, but he usually arrived much later. Would you like me to stay here with you? Asked Vicky. I'll be fine, thank you. The two hugged each other goodbye, and Vicky put on her jacket and grabbed her purse, leaving for work. The back door slammed open, startling Bree, who jolted around, facing the large, bulky young man dressed in black leather. Good morning, Tom greeted her politely. Tom, she exclaimed. Thank goodness you're here. I really need some help in the kitchen today, she said, trying to act relaxed. I thought as much, he replied. Walking towards the kitchen, the tone of his voice sounded somehow strange. Are you alright? Asked Bree, following Tom into the kitchen. Tom turned towards her, and she noticed his hands were lightly shaking. Now, in the gentle light of the kitchen, without sun rays getting into Bree's eyes, she also saw that Tom's face was remarkably pale, with large bags under his eyes. Was he so devastated by old Jill's death, she thought? Or was it sleep deprivation due to his guilt? She decided not to ask anything. He either was unwilling to speak of it or would talk on his own. "I am sorry," Tom replied. "Finally, I heard what happened yesterday." His voice was slow and cracking. "I am sorry I wasn't here to help you." Bree was caught a little by surprise by this response. "But are you all right?" she insisted. Tom shook his head, sitting down on a free chair. "I just cannot believe she is gone. She can't be." He almost cried, making Bree raise her eyebrow. They did not strike Bree as being fond of each other at all. Was he acting it up now? It would seem so, unless their constant banter was a sign of a love-hate relationship. She decided to play along for now, placing her hand on his shoulder. "It will be all right, Tom. If you want to take the day off, I will manage on my own." Tom shook his head. "I came along to help you. I know how hard it must be for you without her." "All right then," Bree sighed, pulling her hand away. "You pull yourself together, help help us both make some breakfast. Can you do that?" Tom got up, readily not a minute later, starting to rummage through the kitchen and making some pancake batter. "Would that be all right, Bree?" he asked. "Pancakes are fine." "Tom, make some toast if you find the time, please." Tom nodded and starting slicing the bread as he put a pancake on the frying pan. While the bread was getting ready in the toaster, he quickly squeezed some orange juice and put the coffee on the stove. "He looks pretty efficient," thought Bree to herself. She never paid much attention to his work with old Jilly, in fact. It was she who took him to work under her rather than Bree. But it appeared that she had taught and trained him quite a lot. She decided to leave him for now and rush to attend to guests, pouring them what leftover coffee she had from an hour ago. "Thank you," said John Olson, the painter, as he got his morning cup. "What's for breakfast today?" he asked. "We have toast and pancakes for now," replied Bree. "I am not sure what else. I will have to ask in the kitchen." "That's all right. I'll have 2 toast and 2 pancakes," he replied. "I'll have that as well," ordered Damien, who was sitting at the same table. "Coming right up," Bree smiled at them both. "Oh, by the way, Damien, I would need you to look at the back door. It seems to be getting stuck again." Damien nodded, happy to be getting some work. Damien and John were the 2 local handymen who sometimes had breakfast together at Brianna's bed and breakfast. While Damien worked at the local harbor during most of the summer, John was more engaged in painting jobs. Both of them were of almost equally strong build, and both worked on any manual job that needed done. Bree attended to the other 2 occupied tables and rushed into the kitchen. 6 toast, 8 pancakes. She started looking around, and some more coffee she finished after a moment. Tom seemed to be in a high gear, and all the food had been prepared already. Jublius was walking around inspecting it from the safe distance. "I don't think I need you anymore, Jublius," commented Bree with a chuckle. Thank you, Tom. You are doing very well. Tom just nodded, continuing his work. I might not even need to find another cook, thought Bree to herself. Perhaps Tom is ready to start working full time. Then she stopped in the middle of the kitchen. Oh dear, she gasped. There, on the table, a platter was laying full of chocolate and jam muffins, still steaming. Did you make those? Tom nodded. Yes, old Jilly taught me that, and I figured you could use some. He smiled at her. Wow, she thought. He was really good. As she walked to the guest room, a ghastly feeling came over her. She saw Tom's leather jacket on the coat hanger, where a large tear on its sleeve was painfully visible. In fact, the tear was just the right size for the patch she had found yesterday in Mrs. K's hands. Could it really be Tom? Did she tear his patch off in the struggle? She wondered how clever would it be to confront him with the patch. Perhaps if she pulled it off cleverly, she could get a confession out of him and report that to the police. If he would confirm that the patch was his, it would be a clear case. Then again, if it was so, she could be dealing with a murder, a large-built murder, almost a giant compared to her petite build. Pulling herself together, she started serving the breakfast and more coffee to the guests, who largely complimented today's food quality. Whether it was to comfort her for the loss of her cook, something everybody in this small town already knew, or was it completely honest, she was not sure. Most likely, it was the combination of both, she thought. Jubliss followed her for some time, brushing herself against the new guest who kept arriving for the next hour, before going upstairs into her favorite rocking chair. Figuring that Bree is going to be safe, she decided it was about time for her nap. Anything new? Asked Vicky that afternoon as she returned for another coffee and chat after work. Bree just shook her head, feeling unusually exhausted. She had dismissed Tom for the day, figuring that he had done his part more than well. That, and after seeing his torn jacket, she was not sure how safe she really felt with him around. Taking a seat at the bar and pouring some coffee for Vicky, she decided to share her doubts with her. I think it's pretty obvious, Bree, asserted Vicky as she drank from her cup. If the patch fits, I see no other explanation that old Jilly tore off Tom's jacket while struggling for her poor life. I don't know. It almost seems too obvious, but I admit I didn't get the right feeling when he was around. Even though he tried as hard as always to do his chores today, he looked pretty suspicious. You should better not have him around, dear, advised Vicky. You can never be too careful with guys like him. Bree nodded, pressing her lips together. You are right, of course, she whispered. Jubliss bounced on the chair beside Bree, rubbing her head against Bree's left elbow. Her nap was over, and it was time to see if the guests had left anything good to eat behind. Bree responded by petting her cat gently. What do you think, Jubliss? Meow, Jubliss responded. Vicky looked around the room. We are alone. I think you can speak, she said. I'm hungry. I think Vicky's right, said Jubliss. About what? Bree scratched her behind the ear before placing her on the chair beside her. About everything. You should be careful with Tom. Even if he didn't do it, He's not the safest person to be around. You should contact old Jilly and ask her what happened. Bree almost dropped the plate of leftover food for Jubilee, looking at her in disbelief, then turned to Vicky. Seriously, Vicky gave her a slow nod, finishing her coffee. All right, fine. Bree surrendered. I will contact Jilly if the police don't come up with anything by tomorrow. Fair enough, agreed Vicky. Also, I think you should call the police and give them the patch from Tom's jacket. They'll test it for fingerprints and whatnot. It should help them a lot if it really belongs to him. I agree. Jubilee purred, curling up in Bree's lap. Chapter 3. Good morning, sir. A police officer greeted Tom as he got off his motorcycle, approaching Brianna's bed and breakfast. Good morning, officer, Tom replied with a sigh. He was expecting something like this to happen sooner or later. Tom Rhodes, if I am not mistaken, the officer inquired. That would be me, confirmed Tom. How may I help you? He asked, trying to hide his anxiety. We would like to ask you something, stated the officer as his colleagues brought the black leather patch sealed in a clear plastic bag. They seemed polite enough, but their intentions were obvious as well. Do you recognize this? Tom took the plastic bag and gave the patch a good look from both sides. Through the window, he saw Marcia, the maid, look down the backyard. He then shook his head. I'm sorry, but no, I have never seen this piece of leather before. Are you certain of this, sir? The officer demanded. I'm positive, said Tom firmly. If that was the only thing they had against him, he thought he would have gotten off the hook easily. Hey, he exclaimed as the other officer grabbed his right hand and pulled it up, exposing the tear on his jacket. This patch fits perfectly on your jacket. I think you are not telling us the truth, sir, the first one demanded. The other officer's grip on Tom's arm was strong and firm, adding to the unpleasant feeling that slowly was crawling over Tom's body. Hello, how are you? Cindy Cooch, welcome. Thank you for the follow. Welcome. Hope you enjoy the story. I'm afraid you are now under arrest, the officer stated. What? I didn't do anything, a jolted Tom said in surprise. You are under arrest, sir. Do you know your rights? Oh no, I'm not. Tom quickly pulled his hand backwards, turned around, and dashed towards his motorcycle. Stop, the two officers shouted as he turned on the ignition. After the initial surprise, they ran after him and one nearly grabbed his shoulder, but he dodged the officer's hand and, already moving, stepped on the gas. The officer ran after him, hoping he would catch him on foot, but Tom's motorcycle was gaining speed much faster. The other officer turned on their car and drove after him, picking up his colleague on the road. Yeah, he ran away. I can't believe he just ran from the police. He definitely did it if he's guilty. Tom was pushing his old Sportster to the limits of its power, with the two cops on his tail taking quick turns and riding through a few red lights, all in effort to lose them. The sirens behind him were dampening the sound of his engine, making him rely solely on his feeling and experience as a motorcyclist. The sound of screeching tires and shouting people drowned in his ears as he rode carelessly, having stopped paying attention to them soon enough. The only important thing was not to get caught. He had been in prison before, but never something as serious, let alone a murder. Nobody in law enforcement would believe his claim of innocence. Of that he was certain. Now was his previous record. He cursed his life and his younger days. He was never an angel, but this time it has gone too far. He said, "I'm out here. See you later." He really did. He was like, "Not today, not today, Satan, not today." As he rode north, he reached a small bridge over the river near a small forest and up in the hills. In a flash of desperation, he steered off-road and went into the forest. He heard the sirens behind him go quieter. The police car was unable to follow him here. He sighed in relief, slowing down a little. "Thank you, old friend." He patted his Sportster frame. He felt again that this motorcycle was the only real friend he ever had. Taking a few minutes to think, and cruising deeper into the thick forest, he pondered what he should do next. Should he just keep going and leave town as quickly as possible? But where? Fairview, Rhode Island, was a small town, far from anywhere else. If he tried to skip town, who knows how far he would make it. No, he shook his head. That would be cowardly. Some time ago, he had made a firm decision to avoid doing such things. He would have to return to town and try to clear his name. But how? "He ran away, didn't he?" Vicky asked, helping herself to some coffee from Bree's coffee pot. She and Damien were sitting in the dining room of Brianna's bed and breakfast, waiting for Bree to return from outside. She had been asked by the police officers to stay in the backyard in case they needed her further help in arresting Tom. Damien was standing beside the bar counter, peeking through the window to see what was happening. Bree had asked him to come early, not only to help her with the stuck door, but also to provide another pair of strong hands. Should Tom cause any trouble for the officers? "Yup," Damien said shortly, running his fingers over his mustache. Then he shook his head. "Darn it," he voiced in half-tone. "What was that?" asked Vicky. "I like it too. It's very good." I said, "Darn it," he spoke louder. "That guy is trouble on two legs, I'm telling you. I don't know how old Jilly even put up with him." He continued mumbling something unintelligible as he picked up his bag of tools, approached the back door, then stopped awkwardly, a step away as the door moved. He made a silly-looking smile, nodding to Bree, unsure what to say. Bree entered through the back door, again struggling to open it. "They're gone," she said plainly. "I cannot believe he ran away." She walked into the kitchen, tossing away a few toasts that were burned. "I hate this," she whispered to herself. "I swear, I hate being so bad at cooking. I can't even make proper toast," she complained to herself. "You okay, Bree?" Vicky asked, gently as she followed her into the kitchen. "Yeah, I guess," Bree turned to her friend. "I'm just stressed. I was right to wait, you see." Vicky shook her head a little. "Look, if he is innocent, why did he resist? They should be able to prove it. One way or another, this just made things harder for him. I don't know. responded Vicky. It doesn't, feel right. Look, I don't care, okay? Bree barked at her. He resisted arrest, which alone makes him a criminal. I don't want anything to do with him anymore. Vicky shrugged, finishing her coffee. She decided it was best not to express her disagreement with this last notion. Her sharp-tongued friend probably just needed a bit of rest. Or in the worst case, if she actually meant that, she would just find someone else to employ. I'm off to work, she stated plainly. If you need any help later, be sure to give me a call, okay? She dashed outside, waving to her friend. Damien's mustache was spread in a proud smile as he easily opened and closed the back door of Brianna's bed and breakfast. All done, he called as he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Cooking is hard. It's very hard. Not only did he fix the back door, as Bree asked, he also managed to tighten and grease up all the door hinges. On top of that, he brushed up the brass handle and the lock, making it easier to lock, unlock, open, and close. The door was like new. Thank you so much, Bree smiled at him kindly. You are pure gold, Damien. His face turned a bright shade of red. How much of your trouble? Damien waved his hand in dismissal. Oh, I won't charge you anything for that, Bree. He chuckled. It was my pleasure to help you out. Well then, have some more coffee and some toast on me. It's the least I can do, replied Bree. Just wait until I get some of it right. You know how bad of a cook I am. I managed to burn the last few again. That's fine, Bree. Just hand me those. I bet they are great. Suit yourself, she replied, bringing him a plate with 4 overdone toast filled with cheese and ham. Those are delicious, Damien exclaimed. As he took a bite, he struggled to chew through the nearly carbonated piece of bread, but he would not admit that for his life. You sure make the best toast ever, Bree. Liar, she replied as she walked beside him, carrying 2 plates of pancakes and a coffee-filled pot. I was thinking. He started gathering the courage as Bree returned to the counter. Yes, she looked at him. Jublius jumped on the tall chair behind the counter and looked at Damien as he was about to continue his question. Damien tried to continue, suddenly feeling uncomfortable. Jublius was staring straight in his eyes. I forgot what I was going to say. Well, okay, tell me when you remember, said Bree. I need to go ruin some more food. Why do you do this to me? Whispered Damien after Bree left. Meow, Jublius replied questioningly. If you don't see me talk for a while, then I probably fell asleep. Okay, Cindy, it's fine. It's okay. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. You know very well. I know you're a smart cat. I just want to go out with her. That's all. Is that so bad? Continued Damien. Jublius tilted her head lightly with another innocent meow. I can't believe I'm trying to reason with a cat, concluded Damien finally. But I would tell you something. He spoke again as Bree walked past them. Jublius was still looking in his eyes. I'll tell you, 'cause I can't tell anyone else. Nobody will listen to me anyway. Meow, replied Jublius, shortly and flatly. That guy Tom, he's a walking trouble. He is, but he didn't kill anyone, Jublius curled up on the chair, her ears still up. He didn't. I'm telling you, finished Damien, chewing on his toast. It was a good toast despite being overdone. Bree had made it, and Damien liked it. He would have had it no other way. Something's not right here, purred Jubilee later that evening as she sat on Bree's lap. I don't care, she replied coldly, grabbing Jubilee behind her neck and placing her on the bed. Bree, you got to listen to me, the cat hissed. I'm a cat. I care even less than you do, but something's really off. I feel it. Whatever is off, the police will take care of it, responded Bree again. I want no part of it at all. She put on her nightgown and lay on the bed beside Jubilee, taking a little time to relax. She turned to her side and closed her eyes. Look, I care about Tom, even less than you. And I care about the old hag even less than I care about Tom. Jubilee, don't talk like that about old Jilly. She was a kind old lady, and she is no longer here. We should have some respect. That's beside the point, Jubilee insisted. Tom didn't kill her. Moreover, he helped you out yesterday without even being asked. He would have helped you out today as well. True, sighed Bree. You didn't even ask about being paid for it. She was not sure what to think of that little fact either. And now he needs your help. They both need your help. Bree's eyes opened wide as Jubilee jumped off the bed and onto the chair beside. Also, my cracker bowl is empty, and Damien likes you, she asserted. What's that got to do with old Chili? Asked Bree as she stood up to fill her cat's cracker bowl. Nothing, but those are the things I do care about. Jan, thank you for the 29 months. Woo! How are you, Jan? How are you? How you been? We're just here reading Witch and the Whispering Woe. It's about a mystery of somebody murdered. Jilly, she was the cook of this bed and breakfast. It's a really good book. It's on Amazon. It's a Kindle book. Yeah, but thank you for the sub. I appreciate you so much. I love you. Thank you, Jan. Thank you. Okay, time to continue again. Here we go. Where was I? Okay. Okay, I was here. What's that got to do with old Jilly? Asked Bree as she stood up to fill her cat's cracker bowl. Nothing but those are things I do care about. Well, I'm not going out with him until he actually asks me out, she asserted sharply. I know, replied Jubilee. So why are you giving him such a difficult time? Jubilee stretched her front legs. I have my reasons. Bree laid herself back, letting her thoughts wander off. It was a warm night, and a gentle breeze caressed her and Jubilee's hair through the open window. The crickets were singing quietly tonight, just enough to rock her into light, dreamy sleep. She dreamed of her past teenage years when she used to work for Mr. Smith. His warm, welcoming demeanor used to make the bed and breakfast a wonderful place. A little piece of paradise in a setback town, far from the big cities and civilization. He used to have a rubbish bin at the entrance of the bed and breakfast. Above it, a large sign said, "Please dispose of any bad attitude here." In the backyard, there was a whole little park, not a big one, but enough for a few people to take a short walk and enjoy a cup of coffee or a cigar. Mr. Smith was very fond of quality cigars, and he always commended Bree for her skill in making coffee. Okay, Jan, good night. Hope you have a great sleep and a great day at work tomorrow as well. Good night. Good night. I appreciate you so much and I love you. Bye-bye. Good night. Good night, Jan. Those were happy times. She started working at Mr. Smith's bed and breakfast back when she was 16, when she first moved into Longview. She went to high school here, where she was lessoned by Mrs. Case. She was a strict teacher, but also kind. She would always reward good work and would happily explain everything anyone would ask. However, there were rules which had to be obeyed. No skipping class or lack of homework was ever tolerated. Thus, Bree's dreams flew her back to when she was 16, where she was sitting in Mrs. Case's class. Hello, now no fun. How are ya? I'm doing good. We are reading this book, A Witch with the Whispering Woe. It's a mystery book. It's about somebody who got murdered at a hotel, basically. It's like a hotel, like a local hotel type of restaurant thing. And it was the cook. She got murdered. So it's about trying to find out who murdered her. And the main character, she's a witch and her cat talks. Yeah, it seems pretty good. It's very interesting. I like it. I like it. Okay. Time to continue. Miss 𝙗𝙚𝙫𝙚, I would like to have a word with you, Mrs. Case said in a clear, authoritative tone. Miss 𝙗𝙚𝙫, I would like to have a word with you, Bree heard again as she woke up from her dream. She was suddenly wide awake, but the voice was clear. Bree sat up in shock and rubbed her eyes as she gazed at the apparition before her. It was Mrs. Jilly Case, who was sitting on the side of her bed. She looked younger, but not much younger, and had again the posture of a teacher. Am I still dreaming? Bree thought. She looked at 𝙬𝙬, who was sound asleep on her chair. Her back was gently rising and falling, and she was snoring quietly. Bree turned back to Mrs. Case, who was still there, waiting patiently to get her attention. She stood up, nodding to her old teacher and cook. You called, madam? You called me, dear? Mrs. Case replied in a gentle yet strict tone. Not the other way around. Chapter 4. I don't know how it happened, Bree told Vicky the next morning. It was rather early, and Vicky was struggling to stay awake. Bree had called her before 6 o'clock, wanting to share her discovery with her. Please, just give me the darn coffee before you continue, she demanded. If you don't know what happened or how it happened, imagine how I must feel. 20 minutes ago, I was still talking to Mr. Sandman, she complained. Very well, I suppose you are right. I could use some as well, Just wait a bit for the water to boil. Darn, I needed this, said Vicky as she took a sip of her coffee. Bree had made it extra strong this morning. The early morning breeze aired the dining room, giving an additional feel of refreshment to the morning coffee. Yet a sense of uneasiness was present, not between the two friends, but due to their now mutual feeling about something not being right. So, as I was saying, Bree started softly after a few minutes of silence. Last night, I had a conversation with the late Mrs. Case. So you decided to talk to her after all? Asked her friend. No. Bree shook her head in response. She just appeared in my room. I'm not sure what happened or how it happened. I suspect it was my subconscious that perhaps wanted to talk to her. Admittedly, Bree cared about her old teacher a lot, and she wanted her murder to be solved, one way or another. Whatever happened, happened though, she continued in a quiet tone. She was there, claiming I had called her, taking your and Jublis' words into account. I decided to talk to her and ask her about the murder. Well, what did she say? Who killed her? Vicky got curious. It's not that simple, Vicky. Bree tried to slow her down. First of all, you have to understand the dead very seldom like to talk about such things. It's just like any traumatic experience in anyone's life. And as reluctant as we are to remember it, so are the dead in that regard. Vicky nodded. But she did get some information from her, didn't you? Somewhat. After we talked for some time, I managed to get her to talk about what happened the other day. First of all, Bree paused for a few moments. She insisted that Tom did not attack her. That's what your friend Damien said as well, Jublis interrupted, purring as she stretched on the bar chair. He was sure Tom didn't kill anyone. How do you know that, Jublis? Bree turned her attention to the cat. He told me yesterday when you were running around. He doesn't know I can talk, so he thought he could share some of his thoughts with me. Anyway, Vicky pushed on. She said Tom didn't do it. How could she know? I asked her that, Bree explained, and she swore Tom would never lay a hand on her. The patch of the leather she was holding was something she made for him. He never saw it before yesterday. Vicky looked at Bree, bewildered. Oh, Jilly made something for Tom? Are you sure you haven't poured something strange in your coffee, Bree? It's true, Jublis interrupted them again. I haven't heard the old hag and the biker ape argue for over a month, she claimed. Jublis, Bree hissed at her. Don't talk like that about our friends. Never mind that, Bree, Vicky said again. Tell me what happened last night in detail, please. Bree took a deep breath. All right. So, Mrs. Case insisted Tom was not her attacker. She stated they became friends not long ago. Apparently, he managed to finish his high school, passed all the tests, graduated, and was thinking of getting a full-time job. On the other hand, he started enjoying work under her. Now that her opinion of him improved, eventually she started caring for him. And when she saw the tear on his jacket, she decided to make him a patch for it. She never got to tell him about it or give it to him. She was supposed to give it to him as some sort of a surprise present the other day, but well, yeah, I get what happened. Vicky finished her sentence. So Tom is innocent. Who attacked her then? Bree paused for a little more, then sighed helplessly. I don't think she knows, to be honest. She said she was sitting from behind, so she was unable to see him. She only remembers a sudden, silent, but hard hit on the back of her head. It must have been a wooden club or something like that. Vicky responded with a silent nod, slowly taking a few more sips of her coffee. Look, spoke Bree in a different tone after a few minutes. I'm sorry I got you up so early this morning. I just had to tell you. I needed to share this with someone, and I have nobody to trust with this besides you. It's all right, dear. Vicky stood up and gave her friend a comforting hug. I'm glad you told me this. I honestly am. It was time for Vicky to leave for work then, and Bree started making more coffee. Marcia and Lynette would also be here soon, so it was best to finish up the story. John Olsen knocked politely on the back door an hour later. Good morning, Bree, he greeted. Bree, as she opened the door, I'm here to finish the paint job. Sorry for not being here yesterday. Don't worry about that, John, replied Bree, pouring him a coffee and putting some barely done toast for him on the bar counter. I was just really disturbed by the whole affair. I never like to hang around such events. They creep me out, John explained as he sat at the bar. The fewer people around, the better, Bree thought to herself, standing beside the bar as John chewed on his toast. So I heard they arrested Tom. Bree shook her head. He ran away, at least from what I heard, she replied. But I don't think he did it. He's a criminal, Bree, and old Julie used to provoke him a lot. I'm surprised he managed to take so much before he snapped, John continued. Bree decided against continuing the discussion. The less said, the better. Even she did not know what to think about Tom anymore. The main door opened wildly as Damien entered the dining room. Good morning, he greeted heartily. Before stopping halfway towards the bar counter, he glanced aside, then grabbed his tote bag with both hands. I came to do the paint job, but I see John decided to do it after all. Don't worry, Damien. John just didn't want to get involved with the recent trouble, Bree explained. Come, have a seat, have some fresh coffee. Damien's mustache widened. That sounds great, he sat at the bar, while John finished his coffee and went out to the backyard to finish his painting. Bree cursed her bad cooking skills with Tom gone, and without Mrs. Case, she was forced to prepare food on her own. Of course, there was no way to persuade Jubilee to lend any help at all. Throughout the morning, John was doing his paint job, so at least Bree did not feel completely alone. That, however, made her cooking job no less difficult. For every 2 edible toasts, there was one that even Damien would not claim to like. For every portion of pancakes, there was a nondescript pile of baked batter, which did taste good enough, but looked like something Bree never would serve to her guests. On the other hand, she kept it as a nice, sweet treat for herself. Along with some sugar and ground chocolate, it was bliss. During the afternoon, Bree felt a bit of relief. She actively refused to think of all the food that she ruined, hoping that at least Jubilee would accept to eat some of that. It was not too likely, though. Thankfully, she managed to roast a chicken and bake some potatoes, which served 2 out of 10 rooms. She apologized for not being able to serve any fish to a few people who ordered it, but managed to compensate them by finding a recipe for rice with champignon sauce and blanched veal in Mrs. K's recipe book. Jubliss commented, "It smelled awful, but Bree was rather proud of it." Guests in 3 rooms ordered macaroni, which slightly relieved Bree. At least she knew how to do that, since she had some leftover champignon sauce. This managed to impress 2 vegetarian guests, along with a large bowl of grated cheese. She made a mental note to make something like this again. It seemed like a pretty good idea, of course. Jubliss disagreed with that, but Bree was ignoring her completely by now. By the time the last 3 rooms were about to be served, she had run out of ideas. Luckily, they were not overly demanding guests, so she just sliced some potatoes, layered them in a pan with 2 layers of pork meat, some onion circles, which she failed to cut properly, and vegetables, all topped with some sour cream. She was surprised at the large amount of food this eventually made, but it was enough to serve 3 rooms, herself, and eventually John, who had just finished his paint job a little while earlier. Once more, she refused to look at the pile of ruined food in the kitchen. As John sat at the table near the bar, Bree counted a few bills and paid him for his work. Before serving John his lunch, he ate his lunch in quiet, not saying anything. Before standing up and visiting 2 of the 4 whist ladies who had just arrived, he always had been very polite towards them. Before the other 2 arrived, though, John departed, waving goodbye to Bree. "You aren't done, dear," Jubliss reminded her as she sat to relax after managing to make lunch. "I know, Jubliss, I know." Bree got up a few minutes later and walked downstairs into the basement to pick up laundry. She was unbelievably exhausted and against her will wished Tom was here again. "I swear, if he comes through my door and asks for shelter from the police, I will cover him up all I can, just to get some help with all of this," she murmured as she laid out the laundry, making sure there was enough clean towels for everyone. Jubliss bounced into the shelf where a pile of clean towels was placed and neatly folded, but Bree grabbed her behind the neck and put her back on the floor. "Don't even think about it." She went back into the dining room, placing Jubliss on the bar counter. "I'm going down to the police station for a bit," she said. "Watch the bar for me, will you?" Thank you for the follow, XX welcome. Welcome, how are you? We're just reading A Witch Whispering Woe. It's a mystery book. We're trying to figure out who murdered our cook, because she was a cook at a hotel, basically a local hotel where everyone will have breakfast or just stay there for days. Yeah. So I hope you enjoy the book. Okay. Back to where I was. Meow. Jubliss looked at her with wide eyes. "Oh, don't play that on me. I'll be back in no time. All I need is for you to watch if anything happens." Jubliss lay on her side, her eyes still focused on Bree. "Looking, nothing will happen, okay?" I just feel safer when you're here, right? She rushed out through the back door and down the street. Now, I'm done, Bree stated as she returned an hour later. If anyone asks for dinner, I'll make some, I guess, but I'm not preparing anything in advance anymore, she concluded as she sat at the bar counter, letting 𝙬𝙬 curl up in her lap. She relaxed, enjoying the feeling of 𝙬𝙬's purring and hoping nobody would come around for anything. She had it for today. Chapter 5. The gently breeze was oozing through the window again, cuddling lightly against Bree's hair and skin. Along with it, the pleasant smell of the ocean and the rhythmical sound of small waves brushing against the sandy shore. In the distance, let her doze off easily. The crickets were singing harmoniously with the quiet creaking of the old house. Everyone was sound asleep, including Bree. In the dining room, on the bar counter, with 𝙬𝙬 in her lap, she had forgotten to lock the entrance door. Bree, wake up, whispered Vicky as she found her sleeping on the bar. Bree, she shook her arm gently. Huh? Bree's eyes opened slowly. What's going on? You fell asleep on the bar. That's what happened. Come on, time to go upstairs and lock the entrance to the dining room. Bree's bed and breakfast had an elegant design. It was possible to lock the dining room as well as the back door while still leaving another door open for the guests to enter and exit whenever they liked. Why is she here? 𝙬𝙬 asked in an annoyed tone as she sat on Bree's bed. Vicky raised her eyebrow but ignored her. 𝙬𝙬, please. I'm too tired for this now, said Bree. No, look, this is my room, 𝙬𝙬 insisted. I did not invite her in here. 𝙬𝙬, that's enough, grumbled Vicky finally. This is not your room, it's Brianna's. If it wasn't for her, you would probably be a stray cat. What did you say? Hissed 𝙬𝙬, arcing her back now. I'm just saying, I'm not taking this from you, 𝙬𝙬. Brianna is my best friend, and I'm here to take care of her. Growled 𝙬𝙬, jumping off the bed and walking out of the room. Bree went to the bathroom and returned a few minutes afterwards. You shouldn't be so harsh with her, Vicky, she's asserted, feeling a bit fresher now. It's not nice of her to be so selfish, complained Vicky. She's a cat, for crying out loud. Just because she talks, it doesn't mean she's human. Vicky sighed, agreeing quietly. Besides, you know 𝙬𝙬 is a magical cat. She protects me from all the evil spirits and demons. She does, said Vicky. I mean, I know she is obviously magical, but I didn't know that. Bree nodded, looking in her eyes. All right, I guess I'll go and apologize. Vicky went out and into the hall looking for 𝙬𝙬. Tell me, miss. Only, what happened to Tom? The voice of an old lady demanded. Bree looked around her room and her eyes soon met the ghostly visage of Mrs. Case. She was here again, and Bree was none the wiser how she kept coming. I'm not sure, Mrs. Case. He ran away when they tried arresting him this morning. Oh, this is all my fault, the ghost almost cried. I shouldn't have been so mean to him. He's not a stupid boy, and he was all but good for nothing. I know, responded Bree, gently trying to comfort the old lady. I know he is. Can you please tell him that when you see him? Tell him I said that. I will, madam. I promise. I was at the police station earlier today and I gave them an official statement on his behalf. I told him to check the patch for her fingerprints and explained how it was a gift from you. Well done, Miss Olney. Well done indeed, the old teacher commended her. He's going to have a bit of trouble for resisting arrest, I suppose, but at least he won't be going to prison. And besides, Bree added with a smirk, it's not like he's never been in trouble with the police. The two laughed heartily at this, the laughter of old Jilly's ghost echoing eerily through Bree's room in the hallway. Whoa, that gave me chills, said Vicky as she re-entered the room. I could swear I heard you laughing, but it sounded almost like there was someone else with you as well. Jubilee brushed beside her gracefully, the sounds having gotten her curiosity. Ah, the old hag is here, she commented. What was that? Asked Vicky, unable to see the ghost. I said, the old hag is back. Jilly looked at Jubilee, then turned back to Bree. As a matter of fact, I didn't hear that. I said, Jubilee started again, but Bree interrupted her. Shh. Meow. Jubilee responded in a sweet tone, jumping on the bed between Bree and the ghost. Ask her about what happened that day, Jubilee instructed Bree. Vicky sat on a chair, patiently keeping quiet, not wanting to disturb them. Mrs. Case, Bree started. Do you remember anything significant from when you were attacked? I don't know, dear, old Jilly replied. I'm not sure what you are looking for. Anything you saw or heard, even better, or smelled, asked Jubilee, now turning her head to Jilly. I am not speaking to you, the ghost replied. Meow. Jubilee turned back to Bree, gazing in her eyes. Mrs. Case, please, tell us if you remember anything like that. Mrs. Case took a few seconds to think, then shook her head. I'm sorry, dear. It was such a beautiful, tranquil day. I had taken a break in the backyard and must have dozed off. The sun was shining on me and I was enjoying the sounds of the beach. I do remember the radio was on. I do remember young Mr. Dave Williams speaking about something on the radio. I'm afraid I don't know what he was on about though. Jubilee got up after a few more moments of silence, laying herself on Bree's pillow. That's not really much, she spoke. You didn't hear any footsteps, doors opening or closing, nothing? That's it. Bree snapped her fingers before old Jilly would respond. You said you heard Breeze on the radio. That means it couldn't have been him, because he was at the radio station at that time. Jubilee raised her head. You're smarter than I thought, Bree. You always say that, Jubilee, Bree chuckled. Anyway, Mrs. Case, is there anything else you wanted to tell us? The old teacher went silent, lost in her thought. I'm sure there was something, she whispered after a while. Just let me think. I know there was. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door. Jilly's eyes blazed at the door and Mrs. Case quickly faded away. Is she gone? Asked Vicky quietly. I think so, Bree nodded. I will contact her later. I think she doesn't want to draw any attention. Understandable, purred Jubilee from Bree's pillow, slowly dozing off already. Good evening, Brianna. Damien greeted her as she opened the door. I'm sorry for disturbing you like this. No problem, Damien, replied Bree, holding the door ajar. How can I help you? She glanced back at Vicky, who nodded quietly. Please come in, she invited Damien, opening the door. He remained at the entrance, glancing aside shyly. It's about Mrs. Rowland. Ariana? Bree asked, her eyes widening in surprise. What about her? She asked to see you, Brianna. She's been arrested. She was... Bree's heart sank. What? Oh gosh, this is getting crazy. Hello, Looney. How are ya? I hope you enjoyed the story. Chapter 6. It had been a long sleepless night. After the initial fatigue and sleepiness, Bree could not get herself to catch even the slightest moment of rest. Until then, she did not care much about Ariana. But now that she was arrested, Bree realized just how much in need of help this lady really was. She had thanked Vicky and Damien for their company, making some nice tea for them before they departed. Damien, as usual, commended Bree's cooking, which Bree always found sweet, although a bit silly. It was clear that he had a crush on Bree, but most of the time appeared too shy to say anything constructive. Bree was not sure whether it had anything to do with Jubliss, but at any rate, the cat clearly did not stop him every time Damien would try to advance. She could hardly wait to hear the clock ring 6 o'clock when she was able to visit the police station and see Ariana. The whist lady never struck her as a violent type in any regard, and Bree was sure that she was not the killer. Proving it, however, was a different story. She walked slowly, sleepily down the street and towards the station, letting the fresh morning air awaken her. What was worse, she could not fathom the idea of running the entire bed and breakfast on her own. She thought for a moment of asking Damien for help or putting some effort into locating Tom Rhodes, wherever he might be. He should know by now that she had talked to the police about him, so she should be in the clear for now. Asking Vicky for help would be out of the question since she had a job of her own. One step at a time, she finally said to herself, time to see what Ariana wants of her. She had a rather clear idea why Ariana wanted to talk to her, though. She was aware that Ariana knew about her being able to talk to spirits. However, due to her lack of sleep, along with overall fatigue and stress, she was unable to remember when or how Ariana learned that information. It could not have been old Jilly who had told her, since in her life, Mrs. Case did not know that. Come to think of it. I'm fine, still sleepy here, but I had a nightmare last night. Oh no. A nightmare? Oh no. I hope it wasn't too scary. I hope you don't have any more nightmares after today. I lost myself. Mrs. Case did not know that. Come to think of it, there was very few people who knew it, and Bree preferred to keep it that way. Miss Brienne only. the police officer asked her politely as she showed up at the reception desk. Yes, she nodded, handing the officer her driver's license. Mrs. Rowland refused to talk to anyone except you. For some reason, the officer explained, handing Bree her ID card. Unfortunately, she was arrested last evening when we were not allowed to accept any more visitors. I understand, said Bree, placing the card back into her wallet. Where can I find her? The officer politely escorted her into a secured room, where Ariana arrived soon enough. You have 5 minutes, one of the officers stated. May we please talk alone? Inquired Bree. The two officers looked at each other while Bree approached them. Look, gentlemen, she asserted in a quiet voice. She is a lady way over 60 years of age. I have nothing on my person or saved in my wallet. We won't cause any trouble. The two officers reluctantly left the room, and Bree returned to Mrs. Rowland. Ariana, she greeted her quietly. What can I do for you? Ariana looked around, making sure they were alone. Bree, I would ask you to talk to Jilly, she said. Carefully, Bree was unsurprised at that. She had suspected something like this. I remember when you talked to my father's late cousin. Yes, I remember now, Bree interrupted her. They had little time. I have already talked to Jilly, and she doesn't know who the killer is. Now, I know you didn't do anything wrong, but you did have a motive. Is that right? Yes, Ariana confirmed. Jilly did spread a quite unpleasant piece of gossip about me. Believe it or not, though, she smiled faintly. I don't even remember what it was anymore. Have you talked to my friends about it? Bree shook her head. No, I'm sorry I only saw 2 of them yesterday, but I had so much work, being alone, that I didn't have the time to pay much attention to anyone. But let's leave that for now. Where were you when Mrs. Case was attacked? Ariana paused. Thank you for the good luck, Salvador. Thank you. I believe I was still home, she said finally. Snap, Bree thought. Mrs. Rowland was a widow, much like old Jilly had been. She lived alone, not far from Brianna's bed and breakfast. That left her without anyone to confirm her claim, as well as without an alibi. Ariana was looking at her with pleading eyes, as much as she was trying to hide it. Time is up, ladies, an officer spoke politely, yet in a strict tone. As he entered the secure room, Bree squeezed Ariana's hand, saying goodbye. I would do my best to help you get out of here, she promised. The officer escorted her out, and she could see other 2 escort Mrs. Rowland into her cell. How long will you be keeping her here? Bree asked. She was about to leave the station. I'm sorry, madam. I'm afraid I cannot answer you that, the officer admitted. Bree looked at her watch. It was 6:15 in the morning. Luckily, a nearby bakery was open already. Just what I need, she thought. She dashed inside and grabbed her favorite chocolate cookie and some instant cappuccino. It was not as nearly as good as her own coffee, but it reminded her of Italian food and beverages, which she enjoyed so much. She thought it would be a good idea to cook some macaroni today. Oh my gosh, it's so hot, I'm sweating. No, turn on You have a fan? Turn on your fan, Alvaro. Don't get too hot. Oh my gosh. Okay. The cookie almost fell out of her hand as a car stopped by her. Huh? It was Dave Williams, the other local bad boy. I have the AC, but what? Is it not working? Oh no. Or is it not good? It's not a good AC. It gets so cold that my nose is stuffy in the morning. I don't want that. Oh, I feel you. Yep. My room, I have AC as well. And my ears just give me allergies every day. I wake up with a stuffy nose. I feel you. It doesn't get that cold when you put a fan inside. That's weird. Huh. Do you have something open? Like, is there something open in your room that probably the air runs out? Maybe that's why it doesn't get cold. Or maybe it just doesn't work. Who knows? Who knows? Okay. It was Dave Williams, the other, quotation, local bad boy. If there was anyone more infamous than Tom Rhodes around these parts, it will have had to be the Breeze. Bree froze in place, a piece of cookie feeling as if it had stopped halfway down her throat. In an instant, she had a vision of Breeze walking out of the car, menacingly as always, and accusing Bree of talking against him at the police station. It would make sense. She had completely forgotten that Julie had confirmed the lack of Bree's involvement in this whole affair. And she was sure Breeze would somehow know it. He was a sharp one, although not always on the right side of the law, and his very demeanor witnessed that he was not someone to mess around with. Bree looked at him with widened eyes, instantly waking up completely as he approached her slowly, holding the same posture as always. "Brianna," he called as he got closer. Oh, jeez. I don't know, I think the fan distributes the cold so it doesn't get too cold. I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't know either. I don't know much about air. Well, I mean, you can always like check it out or like call somebody who knows about that, check it out. But I mean, if it doesn't bother you, it's okay then. Okay. Good morning, he greeted her calmly. She swallowed and greeted him back. Hello, Breeze. She tried to get a hold of herself. What can I do for you? Well, he responded, I actually wanted to ask you the same question. Bree's eyebrow raised. What do you mean? I heard what happened in the past few days, he explained. Of course, she thought. Everybody knew what happened. I mean, as he continued, I heard you've been really stressed during the past few days. Looks like old Julie's death struck you worse than anyone else. Bree nodded slowly, unsure of whether he looked benevolent or horribly suspicious. You do know you are one of the suspects, right? Breeze looked at her without changing the expression on his face for a moment. Bree froze again, thinking of whether that was a clever thing to say. Then he burst into laughter. Me? Are you serious? He laughed some more. What is he up to? Thought Bree. The guy said It is perfect. The thing is, you can either put the AC on 24 degrees Celsius or 25. No in between, and that's exactly what I need. 24 gets too cold and 25 too hot. There's no in between. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Well, that's horrible. Yep. I mean, you can always get one of those tiny little fans that go up to 1, 2, 3. Up to high, medium, low. Those always, like, even they're just fans, not really like an AC. They still get the room cold a little bit. I usually use a tiny little fan every day. It's off right now because obviously I'm doing the ASMR. So the fix is to get the ceiling fan fixed, but I'm just lazy. You have a ceiling fan. Those are the best. Yeah, you should get that fixed. Don't be lazy. Don't be lazy. Get it fixed. Okay. This is getting creepy. They always want you to think it's the like the bad boy that is the bad guy, but then it's like somebody that we never thought it would be. There's always that. So I don't know if I believe it could be this guy. Maybe it could be somebody else that we haven't met yet in this story. Yeah, it worked for many, many years. Well, you should get it fixed. Get it fixed. Get it fixed. Or for now, just get a tiny fan. A tiny fan. Okay. Back to the story. Come on. I'll drop you off at your bed and breakfast. I'll tell you about Jilly and me while I drive. Bree made a step towards the car, but then stopped. As Bree sat at the driver's seat and slammed the door, he then opened the passenger door and smiled at her. Don't tell me you're afraid, Bree. She bit into her cookie again and decided that worse things have happened in the past few days already. Sat in Bree's car. It was a comfortable but well-turned and muscled Chevy. Almost perfect for breaking just about any traffic law around. And then running away from the cops. Bree buckled up almost reflexively as soon as she sat down. Like owner-like car, she thought. Mrs. Jilly Case used to be my teacher in high school. Bree told his story, now in a well-meaning tone. Just like yours not much earlier, and of lots of other people from our generation here. Bree listened, finishing her chocolate cookie and regretting that she hadn't bought two. She sipped on her coffee as Bree continued. Back in the day, I was a teenage rebel. Wow, that's a surprise, thought Bree to herself, but decided against any sarcastic comments. I guess I was popular among kids my age and younger ones, but teachers and parents didn't share that opinion, you know. Just like it always is. Bree sipped her cappuccino quietly. Except for Jilly. You see, she saw something in me that no other grown-up did. She took it upon herself to educate me the best she could and instruct me, teaching me, I guess, everything I know. Bree nodded, listening to him go on. We are here, she said as the car approached Brianna's bed and breakfast. Would you like to come in for some coffee and finish the story? Sure thing. I love that. You make the best coffee around, Breeze agreed. Bree smiled faintly, feeling a little proud. Mrs. Case was the one who taught me how the world works. She taught me history, economics, local politics, but also math and other scientific stuff. She made me pay attention, said Breeze, while enjoying a cup of Breeze coffee. She was strict, but by the time I was about to finish high school, I felt internally grateful to her. I was a stupid kid, you know. I'm not saying I'm really smart now, but I know how to do things, and I know how to get by. In the end, we became friends. Bree sat across from him, placing a bowl with the last few muffins from 2 days ago on the table. Somehow this story sounded a bit familiar. Old Chili started to sound like a wonderful teacher. Bree wondered how many other teenagers she managed to put on the right track. I know. She hated my radio show, but I also know she respected what I do. It's honest work, and she always had high opinion on that. Nowadays, I don't even care what people say about me. I know I'm getting some bad press from the townspeople, but my conscience is clear. He finished his coffee, and Bree poured him a refill. It made sense. Somewhat, she thought. If one knows he is not doing anything wrong, no bad gossip can put him down. The point is, I didn't kill anyone, but I think you already know that. And I would never even dream of laying my hand on Mrs. Case. She was like family to me, you know. Yeah, I understand, Bree said finally. And she honestly did understand. If Bree's story was true, then he really had no motive to kill old Chili. On top of that, Bree remembered Chili mentioning his radio show last night. He did have an alibi. There was no way he could have killed her. Thank you for this story, Breeze, she said gently. Well, he lit a cigarette and pulled a short smoke. Thanks for letting me tell it to you. Bree sat back in her chair, shaking her head as she remembered Ariana from earlier. I feel stressed, she spoke quietly. Stressed and exhausted. Plus, I feel like I should help Ariana, who was held in custody under the murder suspicion. Breeze looked at her in surprise. Ariana? One of the Whist ladies? Why on earth would she kill Mrs. Case? Bree shook her head again. No, she didn't kill her. I'm sure she didn't, but I don't know who did. Breeze finished his cigarette and lit another one, letting Bree set her thoughts straight. It couldn't have been him, Bree thought, unless he would go to the trouble of pre-recording his voice and broadcasting it during his radio show, but someone at the radio station would have noticed that. No, she thought, that could not have been the case. And Jilly herself confirmed that it could not have been Tom. Jilly was certain it was not Tom. Perish the thought, as the old teacher used to say. Ariana could not have done it. Not only was she not a violent type, she was a lady in her 60s. And Bree did not believe she had the strength to physically hit anyone so hard. No, it must have been someone stronger, someone as strong as Damien. Bree gasped as the door slammed open, the handyman running towards her out of breath. She barely noticed that she actually had verbalized her thoughts, but Damien's panicked demeanor made her forget it temporarily. Brianna, Vicky's in the hospital. We have to go see her, he panted. Bree's face grew a grayish shade of pale. I found her here, lying on the ground in front of your bed and breakfast. I saw someone hit her on the head from behind, but he ran away before I arrived. Bree turned towards her slowly. Isn't that how Mrs. Case got killed? Yes, it was, replied Bree. After almost a minute of grave silence. Have you seen the attacker? Bree pushed on. No, I didn't. Damien sat at the bar beside Bree. I'm sorry. I couldn't get there fast enough. Like I said, Vicky was already on the floor. I could only call the ambulance and then the police. He sighed slowly, falling quiet for a moment. Darn it. I wish I had a car. I do. If Tom was here, he would have taken her there on his bike. I'm sure he would. Yeah, it would be good if Tom was here, Bree agreed. Bree, she turned to him. Would it be a problem if you drove us to the hospital? Bree shrugged. Sure thing, Bree. You want to go right now? Yes, Bree nodded. As soon as possible. Just let me write a note for my guests. You're telling them you won't be here? Asked Damien. Yes, and I'll write a few instructions on how to get the closet, store, and bakery. Bree explained. Well then, I'll be waiting in the car. Whenever you two are ready, Bree announced, walking to his vehicle. Before getting in the car, Bree dashed upstairs and opened her room door. Jubilous, the cat raised her head sleepily. Can you look after the dining room for me? No. The cat lay back ready for another round of sleep. Jubilous, please, Bree asked again. I have nobody else to ask, at least until Lynette or Marcia arrive. That shouldn't be more than 2 hours. Forget it. I'll ask Damien to bring you some fresh fish from the harbor, declared Bree. I'll lead them to the dining room. They'll figure out what they need to do, said Jubilous as Bree was running downstairs. Chapter 7. Jubilous was chewing on the last piece of fresh raw fish in the backyard, sitting on the ground beside the porch where Bree was. The golden stripes on her tan-colored fur were gleaming in the morning sunlight. Just by looking at her, one could assume that the cat was somehow magical. Bree, on the other hand, was looking in the distance, trying hard to enjoy the view of the sunrise. She could not, however, get her mind off the stressful events unfolding around her, and she felt increasingly helpless about them. What was worse, she was still without a cook. While her maids were pure gold at cleaning guest rooms, they were as useless in the kitchen as Bree was. She smiled faintly as she looked at Jubilous, who was crunching the fish and purring at the same time. At least she was there, which, after the years they spent beside each other, did give a strange, distant sense of safety. How's your friend? Jubilous asked while munching on a juicy piece of fish. Our friend, Jubilous, not just mine, Bree replied. She found it interesting that the cat considered all things as her own, but none of Bree's friends. Whatever. How is Vicky? Bree looked at Jubilous, surprised. She actually used her real name. She is fine, as much as she can be after being knocked out. Well, at least now we know she wasn't the killer. Noted, Jubilous. Jubilous, how can you even relax, Bree? I'm joking. Did she say anything? No, I'm afraid she didn't. responded Bree weakly. Her brain isn't exactly working as it should yet. You mean besides the obvious fact she's human? Asked 𝙬𝙬 with a faint smirk on her whiskers. 𝙬𝙬, I would appreciate it if you would refrain from such comments. At least about Vicky. The cat frowned, biting vigorously on another piece of fish. Your notions about old Jilly were bad enough, let alone about everyone else. Well, excuse me for being a cat, responded 𝙬𝙬, flatly while still munching. Bree sighed, standing up and taking a few steps around. Vicky's physically fine, she continued, talking more to herself than 𝙬𝙬. According to doctors' words, the hit on her head only caused a lapse in her short-term memory. It might even be temporary. So she might even remember where she was or what she was doing there. She might even remember something about the attacker. Bree gave it a longer thought, walking around the backyard for a few more minutes. Vicky obviously had suffered a terrible impact on the back of her head. The kind of impact that could kill a weaker or older person, such as Jilly. Such as Jilly case. Sorry. Getting tongue twisted. Okay. There was no doubt the attacker was the same person. After they eliminated all the obvious suspects, it became quite clear the suspect was a tall, strong person. Most certainly male. Vicky was also tall, much taller than Bree, and even taller than old Jilly was. So the attacker must have had a precise, high reach according to Vicky. She had found something, but that was all she remembered. She was unable to say what or where. Damien claimed he had found her here in the backyard. The attacker had run away by the time Damien arrived. But where? Can I share something with you, 𝙬𝙬? Meow, 𝙬𝙬 responded. It occurred to Bree that sometimes a cat word really said more than a number of human words. She was absolutely certain that 𝙬𝙬's words meant something along the lines. Sure thing, Bree. You know, you can tell me anything. It's not like I care much anyway, but I'm here for you. In cat language, a single meow is enough to say all that. I'm actually starting to understand you when you just meow, asserted Bree. Before continuing to express her thoughts, she then paused, trying to wrap her head around the idea that had sprung into her mind. 𝙬𝙬, please tell me something. Something? 𝙬𝙬 replied sarcastically, still focused on her fish. She clearly displayed no regard for Bree's concern. What if Damien could not identify the attacker because there was no other attacker at all? Bree's heart sank once more as she spoke those words out loud. It suddenly became all too clear. If that's so, then you solved the case, dear 𝙬𝙬 responded coldly, still munching on her fish. About to fall asleep. You made it, Toasty. Well, I'm glad you're falling asleep. Gotta sleep. Okay. I would continue reading you the bedtime story. If that's so, then you solved the case. Dear 𝙬𝙬 responded coldly, still munching on her fish. But, Bree stuttered, he was so kind to me and sweet. 𝙬𝙬 looked at her indifferently. Is that why you've been keeping him away from me all this time? Because you knew he was the killer? No. 𝙬𝙬 bounced onto the porch, curling up on it. I didn't know. But Is he? Could that really be true? Bree almost squealed, then sat beside her cat and hugged her tightly. Oh, Jubliss, what are we going to do? Meow, Jubliss shortly replied. But why would he take her to the hospital then? Doesn't make sense. Bree tried to wrap her head around it. Or was he just playing it? Did he think he scored more points with me if he made it look like he saved my best friend? Brianna sighed. He never struck me as a conspiratorial type. She spoke still, holding Jubliss. He always seemed, I don't know, I can't say simply minded because he's very sharp, but she paused. I just can't wrap my head around him being the killer. Jubliss, I just can't, she said in a higher voice. Perhaps you should look through where she went once more, dear, suggested Jubliss after letting Bree calm down. You might find something. I don't know, responded Bree, feeling a wave of indifference coming over her again. The police have searched through this backyard and through my room where Vicky was that night earlier with me. They didn't find anything. Just because they didn't find anything doesn't mean there's nothing to find, asserted Jubliss. I'm surprised how you humans ever can find anything with all your dull senses anyway. Is that so? Bree smirked at her cat's remark. Fine, let's go look. Bree's room was turned upside down from yesterday's police inspection. Apart from her bed, which she took the effort to set up after they had left, she did have to sleep somewhere after all. Apart from that, in this whole mess, Bree wondered how anyone could find anything indeed. Jubliss bounced around the room and smelled here and there. This smells like me, she asserted. This too figures because it's mine. This smells like you, although it's mine. She kept sniffing around for a little more. Me, you, but mine. Me, you, but mine. Vicky, on my chair. You again, my stuff. Me. Vicky on my bed. You and my bed, me. Okay, I get it, commented Bree. All is yours and we're just using your stuff. Exactly, Jubliss confirmed. I'm a cat, remember? Everything is mine. You just use it when I don't care about it. Whatever, responded Bree. Did you find anything out of the ordinary? Yes, Jubliss responded. Too many people on my stuff. Yes, but what people, Jubliss? Anyone except Vicky or me, Bree asked, sitting on her bed and resting her arms on her knees. No, just the two of you and two cops in smelly uniforms. I suppose everyone else knows better than to invade my property. Look, you want someone who can sniff better? Get yourself a dog. Bree sighed slowly, remembering her previous reasoning. What if it really was Damien? The thought slowly was sinking in, and it started gradually looking worse. If that was the case, then there was nobody she really could trust. Ariana was still in custody, Vicky was in the hospital, and Tom was still unseen and unheard. She preferred not to involve her two maids, and besides, she was not on a friendly level with them. They did the cleaning, and she cut them a check every month. It was the beginning and the end of their relationship. Bree walked downstairs slowly, still unable to believe she had a property-related discussion with a cat a few minutes ago. It was not the first time, but it had always fascinated her nevertheless. perhaps? The old hag has remembered something more to share with us, Jubilee suggested, as she dashed into the dining room. Indeed, there in the faint light, the figure of Mrs. Case was waiting for Bree, seemingly willing to talk again. "Good morning, Mrs. Case." Bree greeted her politely. "We had another victim of your attacker," she said. "I have heard," replied Jilly. "You have?" Bree expressed her surprise, jubilant smirk. "It seems like rumors have traveled even among the deceased," she stated. "Is your friend well?" asked Jilly, ignoring the cat's remark. "Yes, I believe she will be. Well, she just lost her memory of the entire event. She only said that she found something somewhere and then got hit in the head after that." "I see. Well, what did she find? And where is my Tom?" asked Jilly. Bree sat at the counter again, facing her old teacher. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Case, but I don't know the answer to either of those," she admitted. "Jubilee and I have just looked through my room and found nothing." She poured herself some more coffee and frowned when she realized there were no more muffins or cookies. "I'm going to the backyard and look there. Would the two of you like to accompany me?" "There were a lot of people here during the past few days," Jubilee stated after sniffing around quickly. "Please don't get a dog, Bree." Bree strolled through the entire backyard, feeling a little desperate that the attacker did not leave any clues behind him. Jubilee rushed against her ankle, purring gently. "The only two things out of the ordinary here," spoke Bree slowly, "are the loose banisters that Damien hadn't fixed yet, and this bag of painting tools that John left behind." "What did you say?" Julie asked her, bewildered. Bree stuttered, startled by Julie's sudden aggressive tone. "I just said there's this loose banister and the bag of painting tools." "John," gasped Jilly, as she followed Bree back into the dining room. "What about John?" asked Bree, as she took some more coffee. "It was John," Jilly exclaimed. "He attacked me. It was John Olsen who put me to my death." Bree almost spat out her coffee. "What? How? What makes you think?" Then she stopped in mid-sentence. "The banister. Only he knew it was loose. I didn't get to tell Damien about it yet, and John was painting it, so he must have noticed." Jubilee jumped into the bar counter, giving a loud meow. "That's why I felt a dull wooden hit on my head," Jilly added. "That must be it. Some time ago, I was threatened by John Olsen," Jilly explained. "But I have almost completely forgotten about it. I admit I did not take his threats seriously." "What did he threaten you for, Mrs. Case?" Bree inquired. "Well, there was a very juicy rumor that I have heard about him. You should ask your maid, Lynette. I'm sure she can tell you all about it." "What? You mean they?" Bree started. "Yes," Jilly cut her off. "John was cheating on his wife with Lynette. I admit, she is a nice-looking girl, but I always thought she was up to no good as well." "Oh, I guess who's getting fired?" Jubilee purred from the counter. "Shh, Jubilee." Bree shushed her. "Let Mrs. Case tell us everything." "Well, I would have had none of that where I'm around," spoke Jilly, her voice taking an authoritative, teacher-like tone. "I confronted him with that and demanded that he come clean with his wife." I bet he took that well, Bree noted. Indeed, he didn't take it well at all. He threatened me never to speak to him or anyone about it again. Did you tell anyone? Does anyone know this? Asked Bree, her excitement growing. Well, you do, dear. But apart from you, I don't remember telling anyone else. I admit I used to be a terrible gossip in the last few years of my life, said Jilly, almost in a regretful tone, but I always tried to keep it all to some good, healthy fun, and never to interfere in anyone's lives or families this deeply. I see, Bree nodded, understanding her point of view. Eventually oh my, someone's coming, Jilly gasped and disappeared quickly before finishing her sentence. Bree's heart froze and saw Jubilee's fur slowly raise, sensing impending danger. Can't sleep, turned on the AC, let's see how it goes. Oh no. Hopefully it works. Just for today. Bree slowly turned towards the entrance door to see who it was. There at the entrance, in a dim light, a large figure was approaching. Due to the lighting, Bree could not recognize who it was. A feeling of panic coming over her as she remembered the person they were just talking about, and how he had left his tools of the trade in the backyard. Struggling to remain calm, she turned towards the person fully and slowly got up. Then, her fears getting the better of her, she screamed quietly before quickly jolting away from her chair. She rushed towards the back door and into the backyard. As she was pressing the handle of the back door, she noticed the figure approaching her faster in the corner of her eye. She pressed the door, which got a little stuck again. A thought of Damien blazed through her head again. As she dashed out into the backyard, not even looking in front of herself. Looking behind as she was sprinting outside, Bree suddenly bumped into another man. "John," she gasped as their eyes met. It was John Olsen, who must have indeed come back to pick up his painting tools. But before she could react, she felt his hand on the back of her head and his other hand pressing a piece of dampened cloth against her face. The world spun around her quickly, and she could hear Jubilee's desperate meows. Her nose was invaded by the sharp and sickening scent of chloroform, and within seconds she passed out. Oh my gosh. It's John and somebody else? Is it John and Damien? Oh gosh. Okay. Chapter 8. Bree woke up with a terrible headache, not in the back of her head as she half expected, but something that more resembled an upcoming migraine. It felt as if her brain hemispheres were spinning, each in its own direction. She felt like she was going to throw up any moment now, until she realized there was nothing to throw up. There was a small stain of vomit on her shirt and on the floor, which made her figure that she had already emptied her stomach in the wrong direction. She was sitting on a chair, her hands tied behind her back, and her legs were tied to the chair. The room was sitting inside was unknown to her. Most likely it was a room in John Olsen's house. She looked around, noticing there were blinds pulled over windows. That and the fact that she was completely tied up made her believe John did not have very noble ideas for her, as if knocking her out with chloroform was not bad enough, she thought. She cursed the substance quietly as she felt the headache grow worse. The spinning was slowly down, but at an almost unnoticeably slow rate. She heard footsteps approach from outside the room, and John enter, scratching the back of his head and shaking it, acting as if he did not know what to do. "Hello, Bree. I hope you had a good sleep," he said, chuckling a little. "I'm sorry I had to knock you out." Thought Bree. What an interesting choice of words. "You just couldn't leave it at that with Lady Ariana being charged for murder, could you?" he barked at Bree after a short silence. "Or Tom. You couldn't leave it at Tom being guilty." Brianna took a slow, deep breath, looking around, and figured those questions were not meant to be answered. "I took effort to frame Ariana, you know. I listened to their talks and their god-awful chit-chat over and over again. I can't tell you how boring and nauseating they can be. I took effort into becoming friends with them long before I struck that old gossiper dead. I couldn't let her do it, Bree. I just couldn't let her endanger my relationship with Lynette." John sat on a chair, continuing to talk to Bree, seemingly in a calmer tone now. "I was going to divorce my wife, Bree. I really was. I just needed to get some good money for a lawyer who wouldn't let my wife take half of my things. Or more, if that happened. Who knows what would have become of me? I would have nowhere to sleep, and maybe even Lynette would have dumped me." "It would have served you right," Bree thought, but bit her tongue. "So I caught the opportunity when I saw the old gossiper hold Tom's jacket patch in her hands. I knew he'd be framed right away if she was found holding it in her hands. I placed it back in her hands when she dropped it. Good thing I had my gloves. But even then, it was perfect. You just had to go back. You just had to go to the police and tell them to go check the fingerprints, didn't you?" He reached out and slapped Bree's cheek. "Thank you for the follow, albino native. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are ya?" You had to, didn't you? You stupid woman. Who asked you to get involved anyway?" Bree kept quiet, hoping that someone would find them soon. "Then I caught an opportunity after painting your backyard. I know, 2 of those whiz ladies always arrived before the other 2. Before Ariana was there at your bed and breakfast, I went to them and told them about Ariana's motive. All I had to do was remind them how that old gossiper had embarrassed her in front of everyone. You should have seen that looks on their faces. They went red, then pale, then red again. But they bought it. Can you believe they bought it? I thought I would have had to tell someone else to turn Ariana in, but one of them did. I don't know which one, but it doesn't matter, does it? Ariana is in prison, and I'm getting away with Lynette far from everyone else. I'm good, just dozing and jumping from stream to stream. I hope you have a good stream. Gonna pass out soon. Okay, no worries. I hope you have a great sleep. And yeah, and a great day tomorrow as well. And thank you for the follow. I appreciate you. Thank you. John continued his monologue. I didn't want to kill anyone, you know. The old gossiper kept quiet, so I didn't touch her. But that day, I heard her mention something about my Lynette. She was about to start talking to everyone about us. See, I couldn't let that happen. I didn't want to kill her. but I had to. And your friend Vicky just wouldn't stop snooping around your backyard. See, I had to knock her out, just like I had to knock you out. Suddenly, it dawned on Bree why John was telling her all of this and what was about to happen next. As he was finishing his talk, he stood up and shuffled through his bag of tools, pulling out a large wooden bat. "John, you don't have to do this," Bree caught herself pleading as he approached her. "John, listen," she said louder this time. "I have some money. I can help you and Lynette get away." He paid no attention to Bree's words. Bree saw him stand above her, raising the bat high above his head. Earlier that day, Tom Rhodes was riding towards Brianna's bed and breakfast. He was determined to reach it as early in the morning as he could, knowing that Bree usually opens up a little before the working hours actually started. After hearing about Vicky being assaulted the day before and visiting her at the hospital, he had met with Damien asking for shelter, or at least a place to hide his Sportster. Damien had explained to him that he was free of charges thanks to Bree's interference, and that Ariana had been arrested while he was on the run. Knowing her as a regular guest, Tom visited her, along with settling his own matter with the police while he was there, relieved that he no longer was being charged, but also concerned about Vicky ending up in the hospital and Ariana in custody. He decided it was time to act. He was not sure whom he could trust and whom not, except for Bree. He had gone out of her way to clear his name, and Damien, who agreed to help him out and filled him in on the information. Figuring that Damien could take care of himself well enough and that he was not as involved in the affair as much as Bree, he decided to head over to Bree. Not only should he warn her that the killer would return to her bed and breakfast sooner or later to finish the job, but he felt he should lend his own protecting hand whether Bree would like it or not. As he parked his motorcycle and entered Brianna's bed and breakfast through the front door, he realized he was no more than a minute too late. Startled by his sudden appearance, Bree ran through the back door. So it was Tom who was in the front. Wow. And then she got caught by John, the actual murderer. Wow. Wow. And Tom clearly saw John grab her in his hands, knocking her out with chloroform. He took a few moments to decide whether to follow John or to call for help. He decided for the latter. Although he was strong, he knew John was strong as well, and John was holding the unconscious Brianna in his arms. If he did anything to her as a hostage, Tom could never forgive himself. Therefore, he took his phone and called Damien. "Come on," he thought. "Pick up the phone, Damien. I know it's early in the morning, but please pick up." "Oh no." "Hello." Damien's voice finally was heard from the other side. "Damien, listen. John has taken Bree away." "What? What are you talking about, Tom?" "Damien, it was John. John Olsen is the killer. I think he's taking her to his own house. Please call the police, Damien, and meet me there. We got to save her." Damien awoke and freshened up surprisingly quickly, running out of his house and towards John's. His house was not far from John's, and he managed to arrive there relatively quickly. A short inspection revealed there was no sign of John yet. Tom was also yet to arrive. "Good," thought Damien. "That gives me time to prepare for him." He circled the house carefully and found there was only one obvious exit. He grabbed the door handle and tried opening it. It was unlocked, and he snuck in, scanning carefully around the house. Mrs. Olsen, John's wife, was not home, most likely at work. Poor girl, Damien thought, working her life away while he's having fun with that tramp of a maid. He strolled through the kitchen and the bathroom, looking around, trying to figure out where he could hide. John would be here any minute now, so he had to be ready. He quickly snuck into a closet between the kitchen and the living room. At a moment too soon, either it was then that he heard John's car drive into the yard and stop. He heard 2 car doors slamming, and soon enough, John was in the house, carrying the knocked out Bree inside. Damien pressed his ear on the closet door, listening to the slow, dragging footsteps walk towards the living room. John was within his reach, but Damien figured he should wait for Tom to arrive. For all he knew, John could be armed, perhaps even carrying a gun, and Damien then would stand no chance. Instead, he decided to keep listening. He heard John leave the room and return a few minutes later, and he heard gagging sounds from Bree. She must have thrown up. That's good, in a way, Damien thought. At least she's still alive, and soon she will be awake. Indeed, he heard John start talking. He figured Bree was awake, and his suspicion was confirmed when she spoke. She clearly was trying to defend herself. Did that mean John was going to kill her? There was no time to wait for Tom or anyone else. Damien's eyes already had adapted to the darkness of the closet, and he grabbed a long wooden mop that was leaning on the wall beside him. Now or never, he whispered to himself and barged out of the closet, running towards John. Step away from Bree, he shouted, having gathered the courage. Now, Damien, Bree gasped, both her and John's look turning towards him. Instead of hitting Bree as planned, John quickly swung his bat towards Damien, who easily dodged the first clumsy blow, realizing that his opponent had a more dangerous weapon in hands. Damien made a few steps around him, swinging the mop against him. You should have picked someone your own size. You should, he taunted John, but also was starting to feel a little desperate. His swings with an inferior improvised weapon were just unable to make a single hit. John dodged Damien's blows with equal agility while trying to place a few of his own. Damien took a deep breath, realizing that time was on his side. If he could keep this fight up until someone else arrived, they would win. All he needed was a little patience and strength, and for Bree, he would have pulled the last atoms of those from himself. John became more aggressive, though in all likelihood also aware of the situation. He wanted to put Damien down no matter what. Damien suddenly noticed the weakness in John's attacks. As John swung the bat, Damien quickly slapped his right hand with the long mop handle. Ow! John screamed, his grip on the bat visibly loosening. Good, thought Damien. One more blow like this and he would have had a clear advantage. He quickly caught another such lucky chance, this time hitting John on his left hand. John grunted in pain again, and Damien swung with all his strength, hitting hard on the bat itself. The heavy piece of wood slammed on the living room floor, recoiling a little on the parkour tree. Damien's strong mustache widened, smelling sweet victory against his opponent. Bree watched them, on the brink of screaming or crying, forcing herself to stay quiet and attract as little attention as possible. For a moment, she thought she heard scratches from outside of the window blinds. Then she heard someone move around the house. The two men locked in their wrestling did not seem to notice either. John raised his hand, and Damien, having a rush of adrenaline hit his head, made a stupid move. He jabbed the mop handle into John's stomach, but a little too slow to hurt him. And John quickly grabbed it, starting to pull it out of Damien's hands. Damien, still enraged, pushing the mop further, but John stood his ground, squeezing aside and then pushing the mop back in charge, driving Damien against the wall. Both held the mop tight, pushing towards each other and tripping over, rolling over the floor. Damien finally managed to gain an advantage, pressing John against the floor and holding the mop handle under his neck. "It's over, John," he stated. "They're coming for you. Everybody knows what you did. You won't be getting away with it. You won't." He was breathing heavily, but still holding his weight over John, rendering him immobile. All of a sudden, Jubilis jumped into the room. Bree glanced at her with glazed eyes, and Jubilis let out a loud meow. Both Damien and John looked at the cat, losing their focus for a moment. Damien lost focus for a split second longer, enough for John to reach up and land a devastating uppercut with his fist to his opponent, instantly knocking him away. He got up quickly and grabbed his wooden bat, looking at Damien once again. He was not moving. John turned to Bree, then approaching her slowly and raising the bat up once more. Jubilis quickly bounced into Bree's laps. "Stop," the cat shouted. John blinked at the cat, making a clumsy step with his left foot. "Stop right now," Jubilis repeated. John's eyes widened in disbelief that the cat was staring into his eyes, and John felt as he couldn't move. A moment later, the door to the living room slammed open. John gasped as he saw a large black figure charge towards him. "You killed Mrs. Case, you son of a..." Tom screamed from the top of his lungs. Bree felt as if her insides were trembling from Tom's voice. In a split second, John was on the floor, Tom kneeling over him and laying a flurry of punches on his head and into his ribs. "You dirty double-crossing wretch, little worm," Tom shouted, out of control, blasting a strong punch with every word he spat out. He kept cursing at John and spewing insults. "Tom, stop," Bree pleaded. "Tom," she screamed, to no avail. She did not want him to get in more trouble. "He isn't worth it, Tom, please." Damien finally got up and stood behind Tom, grabbing his arms from behind. "Stop, darn it, stop you," he shouted at a large young man. "Let me go," Tom screamed. "He killed Mrs. Case. He killed that dear old lady. Let me teach him." Damien struggled to pull Tom away from John, who was on the brink of falling into unconsciousness. Then he slowly released Tom's arms and grabbed his shoulder in a friendly way. "I know he did. I know, Tom." He spoke gently. "But this isn't the way. Old Julie wouldn't want you to go to prison because of him," Bree added. "Please, rather than that, untie me." Tom was breathing quickly and heavily, but he felt the initial surge of anger slowly leave him. He turned to Bree, kneeling behind her and grabbing the rope. "Hang on," he said, still panting from exhaustion. He then pulled the rope, pulling it for a few seconds before tearing it loose. "Wow," said Bree, shocked at Tom's amazing strength. "Thanks, I didn't know you could do that." "Sure didn't," Damien confirmed, standing over John. He was breathing but not moving. You sure picked the wrong guy to mess around with, John. You should have known Tom would come for you after all you did to him. You should." Bree thanked Tom again as he set her legs loose and then sighed in relief. She could hear the police sirens approaching outside the house. Chapter 9. This is the last chapter. Let's see. I can't believe it. It was just John. That's crazy. Let me just take a sip of water. Oh. Okay. Chapter 9. Jubilis was curled up on the tall chair behind the bar counter at Brianna's bed and breakfast. It was another beautiful late summer morning in Fairview, and there was an omnipresent feeling of calm around her. She purred quietly, enjoying the sound of a small wave splashing against the sandy beach and the light-hearted chatter among the guests in the dining room. "Sometimes something smells really good," she heard Tom say as he entered the kitchen from the back door. "What are you making, Bree?" "Apple pie," Bree replied with a smile. "Full 3 pans, no less." "Whoa," Tom replied in surprise. "That sounds like a big thing for you. No offense, Bree." "I picked up the recipe from Mrs. K's books. There's some really delicious stuff here." "Really? I didn't know she had it. Can I have a look?" "Certainly," Bree replied, handing Tom a thick, hardcover notebook. Tom opened it and skimmed through the pages. They had the distinct smell of old paper and were all handwritten by old Jilly. Tom wrapped his arms around the notebook, holding it tight against his chest. Bree saw a small tear from his left eye, but he quickly turned around. "You know, Tom, I don't think I'll be able to make much out of her recipe book," Bree asserted. "But I would like you to continue working here if you don't mind." She saw Tom nod slowly, still not moving or saying anything. He might be weeping quietly, Bree thought. I should best leave him alone for a while. She exited the kitchen and went outside, looking in the distance. Mrs. Case will be missed indeed. At least her murder was brought to justice, Bree thought. By the time John was arrested, the entire town knew what had happened. Bree thought that old Jilly's spirit lived on in the rumors that kept spreading around town. With or without her, Mrs. Olsen had filed a request for divorce on the very same day. Bree had met her at the police station where she had gone to see and talk to her husband. As soon as she found out the whole story, she claimed they no longer were married. Breeze had shown up as well, and he claimed he knew a good lawyer from the big city. John was in for a long sentence, and when he got out, there would be very little waiting for him. Bree was happy to find out Ariana had been released. Besides a little inconvenience, she was all right and had received an official apology from the local sheriff. Bree, along with Damien and Tom, agreed not to loiter around the police station for longer than they had to, and they refused to take any credit for solving the case. With or without brief conversations with the ghost of Mrs. Case, all was best left untold to the public. As she returned to the kitchen, Bree found Tom sitting at the table, still scrolling through old Julie's recipe book. "I would like to make a copy of the recipe book," Bree asserted. "I need something that finally would teach me how to cook." Tom looked at her. His eyes were red, but he was not crying anymore. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "I understand, Tom. There is no shame in crying over her." "I would," Tom started, then paused for a second. "I would also like a copy of the notebook if I may ask you for that," he stated politely. "No," Bree replied shortly. Tom's eyes widened. "I want you to have the original." "She would want you to have it." Tom's face spread into a happy smile, and another tear went down his cheek. "Thank you, Bree." He grabbed her hand and squeezed it gently. The apple pies turned out almost perfect. One of them was slightly overdone, and Bree decided that one was for Tom. He claimed a number of times he liked them that way. The other two were for Damien and for the guests. Bree hoped there would be some left over after lunchtime today. As it turned out, not only did she have nothing left, but her guests, in fact, wanted more. She promised to make some more for tomorrow, secretly hoping Tom would do it instead. He still seemed to be light years ahead of her in regard to cooking after all. Jubliss followed Bree downtown and then towards Damien's house later that evening. She was carrying the large pan and felt rather proud of herself. Finally, some quality food which she did not ruin. The town seemed peaceful and quiet. She heard crickets singing again and looked forward to listening to their songs later while going to sleep. "Brianna," Damien exclaimed as he opened his front door, meeting her. "Hello, Damien," as she greeted him with a smile. "I would like to thank you for what you did for me yesterday. It was incredibly brave of you." Damien's face went crimson red, and he did not know where to look. He stuttered. "I mean, you're welcome," he said, finally remembering what to say. "Thank you for the follow, Reina. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are ya? I hope you enjoyed the story." "It was the only thing to do." "It was." Bree nodded. "Thank you anyway. I have made this for you as a small token of my gratitude," she said, handing him the pan with the apple pie. He reached out with trembling hands. "That smells like... Is that apple pie?" he asked in surprise. "Yep." Bree smiled with a nod. "That's my favorite. I always loved your apple pie, Bree." "You big liar," she replied. "I never made any apple pie before, just so you know." Damien looked at her in surprise. "But I've had apple pie at your bed and breakfast before, and it was delicious," he insisted. "Yes, that was old Julie's. This probably isn't half as good, but I tried to make it by her recipe." "Nonsense," Damien replied, still holding the pan, content to have something for his hands to do. His face was still bright red, nevertheless. "I'm sure yours is even better." "It is." "Would you, he stuttered again after a second or two of silence. "Would you like to come in?" he asked finally. "That's very kind of you, Damien," Bree responded politely. But very shortly after, I but very shortly, alright, I need to go back to my bed and breakfast and finish my chores for today. Tom is helping me out in the kitchen, I hope full time now, but I only have one maid now. Damien's mustache spread into a smirk as he led Bree inside. So you fire Lynette? He placed the pile onto the table in his small kitchen and offered Bree a seat. I told her I don't want to see her in my bed and breakfast ever again. At first she acted as she had no idea what was going on, but I confronted her with the facts, and she started acting all pretentious. She said she had nothing to do with what John did. Damien placed 2 cups of warm tea on the table. But you insisted, right? He asked. Bree responded with a slow, firm nod. I really don't want to see her ever again. You knew they were together, didn't you? Bree asked, sipping her tea. Look, Bree, I might be a simple handyman, but I'm not stupid, answered Damien. Yeah, I knew I did. But you know me, I didn't want to get involved until somebody got hurt. Did you know John killed old Jilly then? I didn't have a clue on that. I just knew Tom didn't do it. I didn't know he and Jilly ended up being friends, but I knew he couldn't kill her. Even after what she had put him through, she did. I guess you're right. But yesterday, I was afraid he might kill John. Bree expressed her concern. And he would, confirm Damien. He's a hot-headed guy, he is, and John had killed his teacher and his friend, and he tried to frame both him and Ariana. He did. I expected Tom to react like that. Good thing you were there to stop him, then Bree concluded. Don't you be worrying about Tom now, alright? Asserted Damien. I think he'd do anything for you like he would for old Jilly. Heck, you two were the only family he ever had. Bree gave it a little thought. There was truth in Damien's words, of course. He was really not stupid at all. Bree also thinks of you as a friend. He does, Damien continued. And that's a good thing. It is. Those two ain't angels, but when they're on your side... Along with you, Damien, replied Bree with a smile, which made Damien go quiet again, along with another blush. I'll need to be going now, Bree declared as she finished her tea. Thanks for the tea, and it was nice to talk things over a little. Damien's shaking hands unlocked the door, his mustache spread in a wide smile again as he let her out. Perhaps we can, he said, talk longer for some time. We could. Well, you always can come by my bed and breakfast, said Bree. Jubilous brushed against her foot as she exited Damien's house. Yes, but I thought if we could. Damien started before noticing Jubilous. The cat looked into his eyes and Damien abruptly went quiet. Well, he spoke after a bit of silence. I'll be seeing you soon then, Bree jumped in, smiling sweetly as she waved leaving for her home. You really enjoy doing this, don't you, Jubilous? Bree asked as they walked towards her bed and breakfast. I told you already I have my reasons, Jubilous insisted. Will you ever let him ask me out? Bree said, expressing her curiosity. Perhaps, the cat answered shortly. When? Asked Bree, not expecting an answer. She did not get one in any case. The walk home was more than enjoyable. The breeze was carrying scents of the sea again, and crickets were singing louder now, as the night covered the small town of Fairview completely. So, what are we going to do tomorrow? Bree asked her cat after a few minutes of just relaxing all her senses. We could go solve another murder case, 𝙤𝙬 replied. Now that you have some practice and a few friends to help you out, she said. Not a chance, 𝙤𝙬, Bree chuckled at her snide remark. I want some peace and quiet. If you didn't notice, our recent adventure almost got me killed. Meow, replied 𝙤𝙬 nonchalantly, causing another few minutes of comfortable silence. You'll probably make some macaroni again, said the cat finally, with a sneer on her whiskers. You managed to last for 2 full days without it. The end. Wow, that was a good story. It was cute and very mysterious. I didn't think the other handyman would be the murderer, all because he was cheating on his wife. And there's actual murders like that. It's kind of scary. So much for watching.